Hey guys, I am so excited to be hopping in here tonight. We have our monthly speaker. I know last month it was in the Facebook main page, and tonight we are doing it in our private Facebook group. For those of you that have joined just recently and have never seen my face before, my name is Meredith Ringcars. I'm a wedding and a portrait photographer, currently based out of Birmingham, Alabama. And in 3 or 2 years, we could be somewhere else. That is the nature of the Restart Specialist. But tonight, I have a guest for you guys. He is the husband of an awesome photographer that I met when we were stationed in Virginia. His name is Ryan Gerres, and he is the owner of THF Solutions, and he's going to talk all about Google Analytics tonight. This guy really knows his stuff when it comes to all things tech and all things Google. He is also an accountant, and so he is here to answer some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and bring Ryan on. Give it just 1 second. Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Doing good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming into the group tonight and sharing your knowledge. Before we get started, I definitely would love to know how you kind of fell into this. Most small business owners are not tech or Google savvy, so I always love to hear that story.
Yeah, so I went to school for accounting, got out of school, worked in a public accounting firm for 6 years. But going through high school, I always wanted to do computer science, so I was always programming stuff, coding websites on my spare time, and then decided, hey, I didn't want to program for the 40 hours a week, and so I switched to accounting. So I've always had a passion for technology and programming and just learning all things related to the web and different programs. So that's kind of my background on it. So when Caitlin formed her photography business about 5 years ago, I kind of had a chance to really dive into some of the background of Google Analytics and SEO a little bit and doing some of the social media managing. Caitlin handles most of the actual posting, but just going in there and seeing what's going on. And then after my stint in public accounting, I did switch over into more of a data science role. So what I do currently, I work with homes.com in downtown Norfolk and do a lot of analysis on their production systems. So tracking in like everyone that's going in, looking at different homes to buy, submitting leads to different agents to see, home values or that they're interested in a property. So just kind of trapping that web traffic through those different portals that we use. So on the side, I also do consulting for other small businesses, kind of just getting people set up initially on Google Analytics and other tracking platforms, and just trying to take a little bit of the heat off of the bad rap that most of these analytical packages get.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and there are some definite bad raps. We have been had by those before. So I'm super excited to have you on here to talk about this. But for those that are not familiar with Google Analytics, and you're going to introduce them to that tonight, why is that important? Is that something that you want to kind of hop into, or do you want to go ahead and hop right into that slide presentation?
We can go ahead and hop into the slide presentation.
Okay.
That's one of my first points. So.
Perfect. Okay, guys. So what I'm going to do is I am still hanging in here. I'm not disappearing. I'm just going to disapparate, use a Harry Potter term, off of the screen. And I'm still here. I'm listening in. I can see your chat. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Ryan here and let him take over.
And you can go ahead and advance to the first or the second slide, I guess. So to answer your question, one of the important things to look at when looking at the analytics of your website is most people's businesses, the customers or the users of the website are kind of synonymous. So if you aren't tracking how your users are getting to your website and how your users are viewing your website, you're really not looking into what your potential future customers are doing. and keeping track of how your customers are viewing your different pages in your website and how they're landing on a page and going through your website is important to make sure that you can keep them kind of engaged and on your site and hopefully buying your products or services or whatever you're trying to sell. But one of the things that Google Analytics especially gets a bad rap for is it being an overwhelming platform. Google is very data heavy. They like to collect data wherever they can, and Google Analytics is one platform where they give the users almost anything that they can track. So you have stuff where you can track your demographics, the age ranges of your different users, where they come from, their IP addresses, how many times they've been to your site. The list goes on and on and on. But with that much data, a lot of people, when they're starting up, they feel overwhelmed because they don't know where to start. You open up Google Analytics for the first time. Google Analytics loads up a default dashboard that has just a lot of numbers and very little guidance on what the numbers mean or what you're actually looking at. They do have some help menus that can guide you along, but they kind of make users hunt for those. So the first thing I wanted to start off with was just this quote from Edward Tufte. It's clutter and confusion are failures of design, not attributes of information. So one of the things we're looking at Google Analytics is there's a lot of information in an actual platform itself, but the information isn't necessarily cluttered or confusing. It's just a matter of getting the information into a design that works well for you. As everyone knows, we're all different people. Our brains are all designed differently. So when I look at a report, I may see like 40 columns with numbers, and it works perfect for my brain and the way I analyze information. But for others, they may just want 3 graphs and 4 columns. So it's really a matter of design, and a lot of those Google default dashboards they have people, marketers, graphic designers kind of working through trying to make that design as best as it can for the general populace. But sometimes your personality just doesn't work for that sort of dashboard. So if you could advance to the next slide, I just wanted to give a quick example of design versus information overload. So like right here on the screen, we have a picture of downtown Norfolk and part of Portsmouth, Virginia. And it's just a screenshot from Google Maps. But what we don't see here is, with a quick glance at this map, there are several different informational layers. So if you advance to the next slide, I can show you some of those layers. So just with a quick glance, we can see that from this map, down on the lower right corner, we have the yellow highlighted roads, which are major interstates or major roads or highways. We also have the second point where we have a little green space, and we have a little green space across the water, and over on the far right that indicate that that's a park. We also have some white streets there that are like a sub street, and there's also some buildings marked out there on the map, which signify like a business or apartment. And you obviously have the number 4 is the large body of water there. Number 5, if you look closely, I don't know if you can see it, but there's actually a little dotted line that's, I believe, is like a walking trail around the hospital. And then you also have the color red there to indicate that it's an actual hospital. And then the 7th point, you see that there's some little docks there for, I believe there's some ship makers there at the shipyard. And then the 8th little point I'm going to point out is those little dotted lines in the water. They may not be visible, but there are several ferries that connect the 2 sides of that river. So they just go through and connect a couple different spots. So looking at this map, our brains are built to analyze information, and they're really good at analyzing information. So the thought process behind Google Analytics and creating a report that works for you is to figure out what data you want to see and how you want to see it, and then creating that report and monitoring that report instead of getting overwhelmed by all these different different layers and points. So if you go to the next slide, we can see kind of the same example for Google Analytics. So looking at the screen here, you have the menu on the left side of the screen that has the different types of reports you can have. Also in the bottom section across that kind of spans the whole page, you have the different channels and a bunch of different stats showing information about your website. You have a couple of graphs in there. So this probably has just as many layers as the map does. You have all these different layers, and what you have to do is just find the right balance for what works with you. And you go to the next slide too. So here's another example of a Google Analytics page, just a different layout with just, one graph all the way across the top, and then a grid with a bunch of numbers down below, and then a couple little date ranges and places where you can add different filters. So it's just a matter of what works for you. No one is built the same. So there are some reports that I can create that'll work for me and it'll work for you. But other reports, they may just require a little bit of tweaking to get to either what you want to see or how you want to see it. There is no right or wrong way to necessarily build out a report in Google Analytics. There are some things that most users should look at and monitor, but how you monitor those metrics and that report is completely up to you. So the first section that I wanted to cover in Google Analytics, if you could go to the next slide, is the audience section of Google Analytics. There are several different report categories in Google Analytics. You have audience, you have acquisition, and then you have behavior. All of these different categories have different sub-reports underneath, and they all pertain to a different section of Google Analytics. So the audience section is basically where you would go to see kind of a breakdown of the different users in your report. So if you go to the next slide, here we have just kind of a detail. I'm going to go through a couple of these reports and show you a couple screenshots of the data in Google Analytics and the audience section and what you can do here. The first one is right off the bat, it'll take you to the overview page. And from the overview page, you can look at several different statistics and you can add different metrics, but a couple definitions to kind of get started. On this page, you'll see terms used like users, which are individuals or companies who have initiated at least one session during the selected date range that you've given. The second one is the new users, which is the number of first-time users during that selected range. So the difference between those where if you look at a count of new users versus total users, sometimes you'll have, well, hopefully you would have repeat visitors to your website. So, but you also want to have new users coming in. So you kind of want to mix between, you don't want to have all returning users because that means maybe your social media isn't getting the impact that it needs to, or there's nothing driving people to your website. The next definition that you'll see a lot is for sessions. So this session, like the value here on this screenshot is just the total number of sessions within that date range. And a session is defined as the period of time that a user is actively engaged with your website or your app or whatever you have linked to Google Analytics. So all usage data, screen views, event clicks, different. If you set up a shopping cart with Google, you can set up some e-commerce where you can track the revenue from that different user in that session. And there are a couple other different things that Google will track per session. The last definition you'll see here is the page views. and that is simply just the total number of pages that someone viewed. So repeated views of a single page are counted as well. So if a person hits your homepage and refreshes it 10 times, that would show up as 10 different page views. So, but it would only show up as 10 page views and one unique user. So you'd be able to tell that one user refreshed that page. So the overview tab just allows you to change up some of the graphs to look at the data, kind of like a bird's eye view. And you can see across the top, you have the audience overview. And what I have displayed right here is all users and paid traffic as well. So you can, for each report, you can add different segments, which they have several different built-in segments. You can do all users or new users or paid traffic or desktop only. So what this does is it creates the comparisons that you'll see on the bottom section, where we have the user count of around 2,000 and then the paid count of around 50. So it just gives you the ability to see how each segment is tracking or how it's comparing to another source. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that I actually added in a new segment, which is, I believe, the new users or mobile traffic. Sorry. So this would give you the ability to create a report on this audience overview where you could see the mobile traffic versus the desktop traffic, and allow you to compare like how my mobile site is doing versus my desktop. I know a lot of the popular thing right now is responsive pages that are very mobile friendly, and I know Google has been potentially hitting people down on the search results because their pages aren't optimized for mobile. So having a good grasp on how your mobile traffic is handling your website is important now for SEO, and general website traffic. But as we become a more mobile culture, that'll become more and more important as we go along. So creating reports where you can see the mobile traffic as well as the overall traffic will be very beneficial in making sure that you're keeping on track with your goals for your website. So looking at this report right here, we can see the different trend lines going across the middle of the page, and it does overlay those different segments. So you can see the green line there in the middle is our mobile traffic, and the blue line at the top is our total overall traffic. So the difference between those two would be the desktop views, which you could then add another segment for the desktop traffic. But sometimes it's enough where you can kind of gauge the difference. So if you look at the left side of that trend line in the middle, maybe like half an inch into the right, you can see there was this big spike in the desktop views, just based on the fact that the mobile trend line is pretty steady, but that blue line spikes up. So you can kind of use the total versus one other segment to kind of gauge the difference there. But that goes back to your Google Analytics should be personalized to you. So if you want to see mobile and desktop views as two different lines, that is your prerogative, and Google gives you that ability to do that. So going down, if you advance to the next slide. So the next slide we have here is the User Explorer. So what this does is it allows you to select the different segment, just like most of the other Google Analytics reports. So like on this page right here, we are looking at the total users, all users for this website for the date range of February 1st through April 4th. So this lists out all the different users by giving a unique client ID to each user that visits your site. So at the bottom of the page there, you'll see that just that grid with all the numbers. So there are no graphs on this actual report right here. You can take some of this data and move it to a report, but the User Explorer is basically an exploratory tool for drilling into specific users of your website. So for each client ID, that is a specific person viewing your website. It shows you here the number of times that they viewed your website. It also includes the average session duration. And it also shows you the bounce rate, which the bounce rate is the rate at which a user visits your website and leaves your website without any other interaction. So that's someone either coming from Facebook or coming directly, clicking on your blog post link for the day from Facebook, being transferred to your website. And then as soon as they read your article, they just close that window and don't click on any other links, have no other interaction with your website. And then the next column over, we have the total revenue for that client ID, which this particular website has doesn't have any e-commerce turned on, and so all the revenue is zero because we're not currently tracking that. But it also shows the ability to look at the number of transactions they had, and there's also a goal conversion rate. One of the things that is probably more advanced in Google Analytics, and I won't necessarily cover that here, but there is the ability to set goals within Google Analytics. So there are several metrics that you can look at after you set up goals to see if you're keeping on track with what you projected, or if it's just a personal goal where you want to increase traffic 5%. You can input that goal and kind of keep track of how you're stacking up as you go throughout the year. But one of the interesting things about the User Explorer is I use it a lot for tracking different kind of anomalies in the web traffic. If you go to the next slide, each client ID, you're allowed to drill down into the user and look at a user report, which is basically a small dashboard of that user's activity and stats, if you will. So it shows you, their client ID, the last time they were seen on your website. It also shows you the device category, the platform that they're using, and it also shows you the acquisition date. So if we look at here at this particular user right here, they were acquired on October 24th of 2016, and they were last seen on April 2nd, which is 2 days before I printed this report. So that just shows you that this client, and their ID is right there. They are potentially a longtime viewer of your website. Whether that's someone that goes to your blog every time you post an article and reads your posts and looks at all your Instagram feeds and just like a very firm believer in your product, or you personally, and they're just interested. To be honest, I think this may actually be my phone in this screenshot. So that may be why the acquisition date is so early. But for each user, it also shows the sessions, total number of sessions across the top, the average duration, revenue, and the items that we saw on the other screen. But then it also gives you the ability to look at in more detail some of their session data. So in the grid in the bottom right corner or bottom right section, you can see that they have the different dates the user was there, how long they were there. It tells you, what kind of device they were from, how they got to your website for that particular session. but there's some other columns that we have suppressed, but you can go back in history, in the history of that client, and you can look up particular details about sessions. So this is also helpful if if you have a client ID out there that has a large number of sessions of viewing your website. You can kind of go in and see how often they're viewing it, how long those sessions are, and you can kind of get some more concrete details on the kind of sessions that user is doing, to just try to get kind of a better idea of why that particular client is staying on your website that long. And hopefully the information you can try to pull out of that would be, what am I doing right for that particular client, and how can I replicate that to other clients? Sometimes you can see stuff like that where it may just be spam. So you have someone that's, for some reason, got on your website and they have a script that's just refreshing pages or cycling through the pages of your website. But that will still show up as a client ID, and they'll show up as a lot of sessions, and there may not be too much to glean from that because they are some sort of spam. But most of the time you can tell, they have different reports out there where you can see in the audience tab that different IP addresses, and there are some ways you can kind of filter out some of the spam sessions. But generally speaking, most small businesses don't have to deal with that. It's more on the larger scale, when you're looking at hundreds of thousands of views per day. That's when you see a lot of the spam. It's just because there's so much traffic on the website, or there's some sort of incentive for there to for hackers and people to get on the website and to circle through your website like that. So those are the two tabs on the audience section that I look at most. There are some other reports on there that are very helpful. They have also the other one that I don't have a screenshot of is the active users. That allows you to look at pretty much the same detail. It's kind of just in a different format. But it's like I said, it's a matter of personal preference. But the couple things that I think are important to look at, no matter how you're looking at it, is looking at the number of sessions you're getting per day, the number of users per day. You want to also look to make sure the bounce rate isn't too high. If you have a bunch of people just coming to your website and leaving right away, you may want to rethink, what am I doing wrong here? Or is there an actual problem with my website where it's something technical where users are getting to the page and then some weird pop-up is coming up and then they're leaving right away? So that's another way to use Google Analytics to troubleshoot your website. So if you're monitoring your audience, going through the month and kind of looking at it a month at a time, or even a quarter at a time. So looking at 3 months and then setting a reminder for 3 months later to look at the past 3 months, you can kind of start to see trends where maybe if you look back and see, January, February, March, everything was going up and up and up, and then all of a sudden, maybe you change something on your website, or I know some website platforms push updates, like Squarespace will update a template, or something on your WordPress template a new plugin will come in and auto update and break something without you realizing. But someone on a particular platform using a particular browser, it could crash on. And so you can kind of look at those trends to see maybe if traffic starts to die out when it should be continuing to kind of on an upward trend. You can go back and look and pull that date range and see were the users bouncing off the page right away, or kind of look at the session times to see if a lower session time generally means they were on that page. It means that we're on that page though a lower amount of time, and generally people that stay on the page for a very short time don't go to other pages. So it's maybe something that you can kind of use to kind of gauge the general health of your website. That's kind of one of the key benefits to looking at the user counts. You also want to, if you are doing any sort of ads through Google, you can integrate through AdWords, and you can set up that overview page to show you, all the traffic versus the paid traffic, to kind of gauge, if your total users are tracking upwards, and your paid users aren't really gaining any traction, or declining. It may be worth going into checking different keywords you're marketing to, or looking at how your ads are being displayed. Is there something actually wrong with the actual ad itself? So looking at things like that will give you the opportunity to kind of catch problems before they get out of hand, and kind of keep you on top of the website. So obviously, looking at the different reports, if you'll want to look at them regularly to get the most benefit out of them. If your total sessions and user count is fairly low, like most of the ones in this example here, you may be able to get away with looking at it once a week or once a month. But if you have a higher user count, higher session count, if you have a lot of web traffic overall, it may be beneficial to make it part of your daily routine to log into Google Analytics and check 3 or 4 reports, and then kind of move on. It's just part of one of your daily tasks to check your web health. It'll help in the long run, but there is that little bit of initial setup and kind of getting used to the different terms and how things look in Google Analytics. So the next section that I was going to cover is the acquisition section. So if you could go, actually, you can just skip 2 slides. Yeah. So the acquisition section of the Google Analytics reporting is about how the users got to your website. So the way Google Analytics separates it out is it separates it by channels. So the different channels that you have are social, which are your channels like LinkedIn, Pinterest, Facebook, and that's whether someone clicks a link on a Facebook page or is clicking on your blog post from the Facebook app. Both of those you can differentiate once you drill down into the detail, but both of those count as social. Your organic search is people clicking on your page after viewing your website or your blog post in a search provider, whether that be Google or Yahoo or Bing. All of those organic searches are thrown into one category. The next category we have is the direct traffic, which are people just opening up their browser, typing in facebook.com and hitting enter and going straight to that webpage. The next category we have is paid search, which are traffic from the different ads on those different organic searches or search providers or other places they're advertising. And then the next category we have is referrals, which are links from other websites that don't fall into any other category. So that's the traffic from another blog post that you're linked back to. So all that traffic can be routed through that category channel as well. So on the acquisition tab, it lands you on this overview similar to the audience overview, which kind of gives you a high level, top-down approach of here's how your users are getting to your website. So it has the same ability to add different segments. So here we're looking at all users, but like I mentioned before, we can add a new segment to look at the new users, or the all users versus mobile users, or all users versus desktop users. And so you can add those segments as you go along to get a better split of what you actually want to see. And then you also have the date range there. So here we're looking at just a couple days in late March and early April. So for graphics, what we have here is we have our top channels, which are the categories that I just went over, in kind of a pie chart to show where that traffic came from. And as you can see here, like most businesses, your social category is probably going to be one of the bigger categories. There are just so many different social platforms that people are pushing their businesses on, that it kind of makes sense for those categories to be larger. The next largest one is the organic search and the direct. They're both roughly about the same size and make up a bulk of the remaining traffic for this date range. Most of the direct, some of that traffic is people just going to your main page, like your home page, because they know your business name, they know your URL. They just want to get to your homepage, and then they'll use your built-in navigation to kind of hunt around to what they actually want to see, or they go directly to your blog page because they know it's Tuesday and you post a post at 10 a.m. every Tuesday. And so also on this, you have the different user counts, a trend in the different users. It's just showing all total users, but if you add a different segment in there, you would also have the another line item for new users or mobile users, and then the goal conversion rate, that's related to setting up those goals in Google Analytics. We currently don't have those set up for this site, but you'd be able to track that here as well. So down in the bottom section is where you'll see some more of the detail. Some of the category or the channels are chopped off the screenshot, but it lists out all your different channels and several different stats for the channels. And you can sort the grid by any of these columns. It's currently sorted by the top user count. So right here we can see that we have 102 users from the social category. And it also shows you like the number of sessions, the bounce rate for that different category. So if you're analyzing, trying to figure out where your customers are coming from, you can kind of use this to get a quick glimpse of, hey, a lot of my web traffic is coming from social, or a lot of my web traffic coming from organic search. But you can also use that to, on the flip side, you can look at on the bounce rate. If you have a higher bounce rate of users that you can see in the audience tab, on the acquisition tab, you would be able to go in and see that same bounce rate for that same date range, and you'd be able to see it by category. So that would help tell you, whether it's users from Facebook have a higher bounce rate than users from Pinterest. I would probably actually flip that. You'll probably see a larger bounce rate from people coming from Pinterest than Facebook, just because Pinterest mostly, your traffic is, I see one image that I like and I go to that web page, and then repin that image and don't really look at the rest of your site. So generally your Pinterest will have a higher bounce rate, but that can vary business to business. So, but the other nice thing about the overview tab is it tells you the number of pages per session. It also tells you the average duration for each channel. So that allows you to just to kind of focus your efforts on areas of your website that you want to improve. So if you see that a particular social platform is outperforming another, you can kind of rethink how you're approaching that particular platform and brainstorm and speak with market experts and friends in the business and kind of see what you're doing and compare what you're doing to versus others to see if there's something that you're missing to keep users engaged. So if you could go to the next slide, I just have a quick drill down version of a particular channel. So what I did here to get to this screenshot was to go from clicking on the social channel brings us to kind of a drill down of that social channel. So here it breaks the social category into Pinterest and Google, Facebook, mobile Facebook, Linktree. There are a couple international versions of Pinterest in there. So it just separates the social category, and you can do the same thing for the organic and the direct and the paid search channels. So you can click on each channel and it will break it down even farther. I don't have a screenshot of this next section, but you can actually click on in the bottom section there, you can see the Pinterest.com. Google Analytics allows you to also click and drill down into the Pinterest.com to even break that source down even further. And so it will allow you to see specific URLs that are sending data to or sending users to your website. And a lot of times, it's interesting to look at, as Pinterest is one of the easier ones because it's generally related to a specific post or an image that is being shared around. So by looking at the acquisition, you can kind of go through and see which URLs are your top contributors. And sometimes it's interesting to just go back and to see what is being pinned so much that it's sending all this traffic to my website. And it may be something that you can go in and look at that data, and perhaps you can be able to turn that around into taking what users like for that particular blog post and kind of reincorporate it into other posts to maybe pull traffic to other parts of your website. Or if you know that a good portion of your users are landing on a particular blog post, you could go in, edit that blog post and put a couple of different use a couple of different tactics to kind of keep users on your site, knowing that they're coming in from Pinterest, they're landing here on this particular page, and then how can I get them to go to other blog posts or go to other pages? So using that acquisition report, you can kind of gauge where your traffic's coming from, and can potentially, I don't want to say manipulate because it has a bad connotation, but you can take your users and kind of gear your content on that page that they're most likely to land on towards them and their style, or whatever they seem to be interested in, to further better your business. So those are the two categories that I was going to go through on the reports. If you advance to the next slide, I was just going to do a quick run through of one of the tools that I use for Google Analytics, and that is a Microsoft product by the name of Power BI. And what this Power BI does is it's a reporting tool that allows you to pull data from numerous sources and combine it all onto a single report. Power BI is a free product. They do have a paid version, which is required for some collaboration and advanced features, but the free version is more than capable of handling Google Analytics data, and it's free to use from Microsoft. But if you go to the next slide, it kind of shows you a general dashboard of Google Analytics data in Power BI. So this is the product that I use and set up for the data consulting clients that I work with. So right here we have the default. There's a default Google Analytics package that has like a dashboard and some reports. I don't particularly use this default one. I use some aspects of it, but I have a custom set of reports that I use to track my data. But so what this does is this uses Power BI to connect to your Google Analytics account, and it sets up automatic refreshes. So every 2 hours it'll refresh the data and show you, your user traffic in a dashboard setting with charts, different trend lines, with a couple of key metrics pointed out. If you can advance to the next slide. It also shows you, the site traffic for the last 90 days. And what it'll do is, as the days progress, it'll recalculate, what the 90 days were. So it'll be a rolling 90 days. So Power BI is kind of just another way where you can get even more of a bird's eye view of your website. And if you go to the next slide, they also have mapping features where you can see the trend lines, you can see the categories broken out of your traffic. You can even map out your website traffic to see where they're coming from. Like you can see here on this map, a majority of the traffic, as signified by the larger circle, is coming from United States, but we have some stuff in South America and Africa. I'm not sure which countries those are. But Power BI just allows you to kind of map out more and have all the reports interactive and kind of a visual friendly manner. But I think that was it. So now I'm going to turn it back over for any questions there maybe.
All right, guys. Excuse me, I've been quiet for a little while. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your wealth of knowledge. And I want to kind of open the rest of our time up for questions. But while we're waiting for a couple of those questions to come in, tell people where they can go ahead and find you.
Yes. So like I told Meredith before the live session, I'm kind of in the middle of a rebranding period in my business. So my website is currently in development mode right now, so it's not currently available. But soon it will be thf.solutions will be the website to go to. And my email address is ryan@thf.solutions. Which we can provide. It's on the last slide of the slide deck, which will be sent out. Email right now currently is the best way to reach out if you have any questions. I do offer consulting services where I can help you get set up with Google Analytics. I know I didn't cover the setup process because it's very specific to what kind of website you have. So it would be impossible to cover everything kind of generally. But if anyone needs help getting started or getting set up, I'd love to help. Just send me an email and I'm fine to help.
Awesome. So what we'll do is when we're done with the live broadcast, I'll go ahead and go into the Facebook page. Again, we're using a third party, so I have to do that later. But I will not only will we put Ryan's email address in there, but we'll also then put the PowerPoint presentation so you guys can have that as well. And just to kind of give you a background, if you're joining us late, Ryan is not just a tech guru. That's not his only hat that he wears. His wife is a very accomplished wedding photographer up in Virginia. And so he has a working knowledge of not only the technical analytical side of running small businesses and checking your analytics, but also he understands the creative side because his wife is a photographer and a creative. And so we do have a question here. I'm going to scroll to that. So the question was, I know you kind of briefly touched on this, but what kind of account do you need to set this up? And does it cost a monthly fee?
Google Analytics does not have a monthly fee associated with it. All you need to do is, or the kind of account that you need is you just need a Google account that you can link to the Google Analytics page. It doesn't have to be linked to your email. So if you have email that isn't hosted by Google, you can just create a Google account, with a separate Gmail, or use an account you already have that is a Google account, and you can link your Google Analytics to that account. But it's a free monthly service. They do have a new analytical platform out there, that I can't remember if there's a fee associated with that, but the baseline Google Analytics is free month to month.
Yeah. And so let's take kind of what you just taught us, and let's kind of, as we wrap this up, and guys, if you have any more questions, go ahead and throw them up in the group really quickly. If not, I am going to go ahead and add Ryan to the group, and of course put his email up so you can reach out to him later. But let's take this to a practical application of, if I go ahead, which we have analytics set up for us, but I will be very honest, we've never gone in depth like that. And so I'm excited to get off the Facebook Live and go take what you've taught us and really delve even deeper. But with those Google Analytics, looking at, say, Pinterest, and let's say we have a ton of traffic that's coming from Instagram, but nothing from Pinterest. Should we then take those analytics and apply them in a way that we're either pushing more effort into the thing that's going well, or go and then assess and fix the thing that is not working at all? Or both?
Yeah, that's certainly a great use for Google Analytics. It depends on which platform is failing or not performing as well. If your Facebook isn't doing as well as your Instagram, you may not want to say nix Facebook altogether, because I don't think it's going away anytime soon. But if you're focusing a lot of your energy on, let's say, LinkedIn, a lot of people aren't really on LinkedIn other than like corporate professionals. So, if you have your creative business pushing updates through LinkedIn and you're not getting much traffic, but you're spending all this time formatting posts or scheduling posts, or there isn't an app to schedule, so you're having to manually go in and repost stuff to LinkedIn. If you're putting in all this effort but not really seeing any return on it, it may be worth going back and evaluating, should I even be doing this? Because all business owners, the most valuable asset is time. And I know a lot of creative business owners, they have multiple jobs, or they have kids, or are moving around the country every 2 years and don't have time to kind of waste on things that aren't really a benefit to your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And so guys, I want to encourage you, if you are hopping back in after Ryan's presentation and maybe you missed half of it or missed part of it, I want to encourage you that you go back and watch the replay of this, because it is filled with some really good information that if we are not taking those analytics, we're not taking those numbers and then using them to fix maybe issues like he talked about in your website, or fixing situations where maybe there's a bounce rate, and looking at why is there a bounce rate on a particular page. And lastly, looking at where is your traffic coming from and assessing how to then spend your time. And so I really want to encourage you guys to do that. Ryan, thank you so much for taking your time to come on here tonight and share that knowledge. Guys, I hope that you reach out to him. He is a great resource. I'm excited to see as this new rebrand happens, what comes of that, and the resources that you'll have available for small business creatives. But guys, I know there are people that need to put babies in bed, and depending on which time zone you're in, you probably maybe even want to go to bed yourself. So again, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on here, and y'all have a wonderful night.